The man lived alone, high in the mountains, in a small wooden cabin surrounded by tall trees and rocky paths. Every morning he would wake up before sunrise and step outside into the cold, fresh air. The wind would brush against his face, and he would take a deep breath, feeling the quiet peace of the mountains. He would gather firewood from the nearby forest, carefully choosing each piece so it would burn well in his fireplace. He enjoyed the simple tasks of his life, even though they were hard and tiring. After stacking the wood, he would go down a narrow trail to fetch water from a small stream. He would carry the heavy bucket back to his cabin and pour it into a large metal container. The water would be used for cooking, cleaning, and drinking. He moved slowly and carefully, making sure he did not slip on the wet stones. He liked the sound of the water flowing over the rocks. It reminded him that life was always moving, even if he sometimes felt still inside his cabin. Everything was simple and organized. There was a small bed covered with a warm blanket, a wooden table, and a few chairs. A small kitchen corner held pots and pans neatly arranged on shelves. The walls were decorated with pictures of mountains and forests he had drawn himself over the years. Each drawing held a memory of a hike or a quiet evening spent alone watching the sunset. Would spend hours in the morning chopping vegetables and preparing simple meals. He liked to make soup with vegetables from his garden, and sometimes he would catch fish from the stream to add to his food. He ate slowly, enjoying each bite, thinking about the taste and the work that went into it. The food gave him strength for the long day ahead. Ahead of their breakfast, he would step outside to tend his small garden. He grew potatoes, carrots, beans, and a few herbs. The soil was rough and hard, but he worked it with care. Every plant was important to him, and he treated them like friends. He knew the mountains could be harsh and unforgiving, but he took comfort in knowing he could grow his own food and take care of himself. His garden chores were done. He would take his tools and go hunting or fishing. Sometimes he would walk for hours through the forest looking for deer or small animals. He moved quietly, listening to the sounds of the forest birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional distant roar of a mountain stream. When his movements were careful and deliberate, he had learned to respect the land and its creatures. Evenings were quiet in the cabin. He would sit by the fireplace reading old books or writing in a small notebook. His handwriting was neat and steady, and he filled the pages with thoughts, observations, and sketches of the mountains and wildlife he liked to record everything he saw. It made him feel connected to the world, even though he was alone. At night, he would sit outside on a small wooden bench looking at the stars. The sky was clear and full of sparkling lights. He would imagine stories for each star, thinking about people far away and the lives they were living. He often felt a sense of longing, wishing he had someone to share these moments with, someone who could understand the silence and the beauty of the mountains. Despite the peace and beauty around him, he often felt empty. The days were long and the work never stopped, but he missed the sound of voices, laughter, and companionship. He had learned to live with the loneliness, but it was always there like a shadow in the back of his mind. He would talk to the animals in the trees, but it was not the same as talking to another human being. He was careful not to let strangers see how lonely he was most of the time. He avoided the few hikers and travelers who passed through the mountains. He helped them only when necessary, giving directions or sharing a small meal. He did not want to appear weak or needy. He wanted to keep his life simple and private. He remembered times from his past when life was different. There were memories of family and friends who had drifted away and people he had loved who no longer were there. He thought about the choices he had made that led him to this solitary life, and sometimes he wondered if he could have done things differently. Even though he felt empty, he took pride in his skills and his ability to live off the land. He could make fire without matches, build shelter, and find food in the wild. His hands were strong and his mind sharp. He respected his own abilities and knew that he could survive in even the harshest conditions. He would often walk to a cliff overlooking the valley below. The view was breathtaking, mountains stretching as far as the eye could see, forests and rivers winding through the land. He felt small, standing there, but also part of something much larger than himself. It reminded him that life continued whether he was happy or sad, whether he was alone or not. Sometimes he would talk to the wind, telling it his thoughts and feelings, even though he knew no one could hear him. It felt good to speak out loud. He imagined that the wind carried his words to the stars or to someone who needed them. Somewhere far away, as night fell, he would light the fireplace and sit in silence. He listened to the crackling fire and the wind outside, thinking about the day and what the next day might bring. He often felt a quiet hope that one day things might change, that he might meet someone who could see the love and kindness in his heart he had no idea when or how that day would come, but the thought kept him moving through the long days of solitude. He kept living his life with care and attention, taking pleasure in small moments of beauty and peace even. Though his life was empty in many ways, he still found meaning in simple routines and small acts of kindness. He fed the birds in winter, helped lost hikers, and never harmed any creature. Unnecessarily, these actions gave him a sense of purpose and reminded him that even in loneliness, he could still make a difference in the world. He often thought about the future, imagining what it might be like to share his life with someone else. Someone who could laugh with him and talk to him by the fire, someone who could walk beside him through the forests and mountains and see the world the way he did evening after evening. He would sit outside watching the stars, thinking about what might come, and hoping that someday his life would be filled not just with survival and routine, but with warmth and connection. With every passing day, he held on to that hope, knowing that deep down his loving heart was ready to be seen and appreciated by someone. The mountains were silent witnesses to his life, his struggles, and his quiet longing. They had shaped him, taught him resilience and patience, and kept him safe in their vastness. Yet he knew that the mountains could not fill the emptiness inside him. Only another human heart could do that. He waited silently for the day when someone would arrive and finally see the man behind the rugged exterior and the loving heart within. One morning, the man was walking along a narrow forest path, checking the traps he had set, when he heard a faint sound in the distance. It was not the usual sound of birds or rustling leaves, but a voice calling out for help. He stopped and listened carefully, trying to determine the direction. The voice was weak, but desperate. He felt a sudden urge to find the person. Even though he was not used to interacting with strangers, he moved quickly but quietly through the forest, stepping over rocks and roots and following the sound. Finally, he came upon a young woman sitting on the ground, leaning against a tree. She looked exhausted and frightened. Her clothes were torn and her shoes muddy. She had been walking for hours and had lost her way in the mountains. At first, she looked at him with caution. She did not know if he was friendly or dangerous. The man kept his distance and spoke softly, telling her he would help. She nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. He offered her water from his flask and helped her drink. Slowly, she shivered from the cold, and he gave her his warm coat. It was rough but comfortable, and she relaxed a little, feeling safe for the first time in hours. He noticed the cuts on her hands and knees and gently cleaned them using water and a small cloth he always kept for emergencies. She tried to stand, but her legs were weak and trembling. He held her steady and helped her take small, careful steps. The forest was uneven and dangerous for someone tired and lost. He guided her along the path, telling her it would be safe if she followed him. As they walked, she began to talk softly, telling him how she had been hiking alone and lost her map. She had tried to find the trail, but kept going in circles, and the sun was setting. She had been scared and hungry for hours. He listened without interrupting, giving her his full attention. She felt comforted by the quiet patience in his voice. When they reached his cabin, he opened the door and helped her inside. She looked around at the simple interior and felt a sense of relief. The fire was warm, and the smell of herbs and wood filled the small space. She realized she was safe for the first time since she had been lost. He showed her where she could sit and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She sank into it, feeling the warmth spreading through her body. He went to the kitchen corner and brought her some bread and soup. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. Her body was tired, but her spirit felt lighter in his presence. They sat together near the fireplace, and he told her stories about the mountains, about the animals and plants he had seen, and the quiet moments he had spent alone. She listened with fascination and began to see a different side of the man. He was not just a solitary figure in the mountains, but someone who cared deeply about the world around him. Over the next few days, she stayed at the cabin while she recovered from the cold and minor injuries. The man gave her space, but also included her in daily tasks. She helped with chopping wood and gathering water, and he showed her how to tend the small garden. She was clumsy at first, but he was patient, guiding her hand and teaching her gently. They began to share meals together, and in the evenings, They would sit by the fire talking about their lives. She told him about her home, the people she loved, and the adventures she had taken before getting lost. He listened carefully, never judging and sometimes adding small stories about his own life. She began to notice little things about him, his kindness, his attention to detail, his quiet acts of love for the animals and plants around him. She realized that although his life had been empty of human companionship, it was full of care and gentleness. She saw the way he looked after everything around him, and it touched her heart. Started walking together on short trips through the forest. He showed her hidden streams, small caves, and beautiful clearings full of flowers. She listened to his explanations about the plants and animals and admired the way he knew every part of the mountains. She began to understand the depth of his connection to nature and how his heart was full of love, even if it had not been shared with anyone before or during these walks. She began to laugh and smile more. She told jokes, and he tried to answer, but sometimes he only smiled quietly and shook his head. She liked the way he laughed softly at small things and how he watched the world with thoughtful eyes. He noticed her happiness, and it made his own heart feel lighter. They worked together in the garden, planting seeds and watering plants. He taught her how to care for the soil and how to observe the growth of each plant. She watched him with admiration, seeing patience and tenderness in every action. He noticed her looking and explained that life required care and attention, even in the smallest tasks. At night, they would sit outside on the bench looking at the stars. The woman asked him about the constellations, and he pointed them out, telling her the stories he had made up for each one. They talked about dreams, hopes, and fears, and she began to feel a sense of connection she had not felt with anyone before. He listened to her and shared parts of himself, carefully revealing his thoughts and feelings. The more time they spent together, the more she saw the loving heart behind his rugged exterior. She realized that his life had been empty, not because he did not care, but because no one had truly seen him before. Now, she could see his kindness, his patience, and his willingness to give without asking for anything in return. She felt a deep admiration and warmth. For him, they encountered small challenges like sudden rainstorms or slippery paths in the forest, but they faced them together. He held her hand when the ground was uneven and helped her find shelter when the rain fell. She felt safe with him and began to trust him completely. She noticed the strength in his actions and the gentleness in his words as days passed. They shared stories about their pasts. She learned about his family and friends who had drifted away, and the reasons he chose to live alone. She shared her own stories of family adventures and moments of loss. They listened to each other with care, understanding the pain and joy in each experience. The woman began to see beauty in the small routines of the mountain man, chopping wood, cooking water, cooking meals. He found joy in each task, and she realized that even in solitude, he had created a life full of love for the world around him. She admired his dedication and the quiet strength in his heart. One afternoon, while sitting by the stream, she asked him why he had never tried to make friends. He looked at the flowing water and explained that he had been afraid of losing people, and that solitude had protected him from pain. She listened quietly, understanding the depth of his fear and the courage it took to let someone into his life. She gently encouraged him to open his heart and promised she would be patient. He nodded, quietly feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. He began to realize that sharing his life with someone did not mean losing himself, but could bring warmth and joy he had never known. They spent long hours talking, walking, and sharing meals, forming a bond that grew stronger with each day. He showed her his favorite spots in the mountains, small clearings hidden behind trees and quiet places by the river. She felt a deep peace being with him. Seeing the mountains through his eyes, the woman began to help with small acts like feeding birds and taking care of small animals they found together. She noticed how the man watched her actions with quiet approval and a soft smile. She felt proud to be part of his life and to contribute to the care and love he showed for the world. As night fell, they would sit together by the fire, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking softly about dreams and the future. She began to see the possibility of a life shared with him, a life filled with understanding, Trust and care, she noticed that even in the quiet moments he showed the depth of his heart and the love he had kept hidden for so long. She realized that the mountain man, who had seemed so solitary and empty, had a heart full of kindness and warmth. She felt grateful to have found him and knew that her presence had awakened something in him that had long been dormant. They both felt a quiet sense of hope and connection for the first time in their lives. Every day brought small moments of discovery and understanding. They learned from each other and began to see life differently. She admired his patience, his respect for nature, and his caring actions, and he admired her courage, her curiosity, and her gentle presence in his life. They slowly built trust and friendship that felt natural and deep. The woman knew that staying in the mountains was temporary, but she cherished the time they spent together. She could see the beauty of the man's heart and knew that he had much to offer the world. And to someone who cared to see it, she hoped that their bond would continue to grow and that the emptiness of his life would begin to fade with her presence. As the days passed, the man and the woman grew closer. They began to share more of their lives with each other in ways that felt natural and comforting. Each morning, they worked together, tending the garden and gathering water. He showed her the best ways to care for the plants, and she listened carefully, asking questions and learning. Quickly, they laughed at small mistakes and celebrated small successes, making the work feel lighter and more enjoyable. Started to open up about his past, telling her stories of times before he lived alone, times filled with people and laughter. He spoke of friends he had lost and family members who had gone away. He explained why he had chosen the mountains, and how he found comfort in the solitude, but also admitted that it had left him feeling empty. She listened patiently, understanding the mix of pain and peace in his words, and offered him gentle encouragement. They spent hours exploring the forest together, walking along hidden paths and discovering places he had loved for years. They found quiet streams, clear ponds, and small meadows filled with wildflowers. She learned to recognize the sounds of birds and the tracks of animals. He taught her how to move quietly and observe without disturbing the wildlife. She felt a growing respect and admiration for his knowledge and his gentle way of interacting with nature. Evenings were the most special times. They would sit by the fire, sharing meals they had prepared together. She learned to make simple soups and bread using the ingredients from the garden, and he watched her with quiet approval. He shared tips and small techniques he had learned over years of living in the mountains. She felt proud to contribute and appreciated the way he valued her efforts. They also shared quiet moments sitting outside on the wooden bench looking at the stars. The woman would point out patterns she noticed in the sky, and he would tell her stories he had made up for each constellation. She loved hearing his imagination and how he saw the world in a way that was full of wonder. Despite the hardships he had faced, she began to feel a deep connection to him through these small, shared experiences. They spent more time together. The woman began to notice the depth of his kindness. He never hesitated to help animals in need or to care for the plants. They would find a small bird with a broken wing or a squirrel that had fallen from a tree, and he would carefully tend to it. She watched as he showed patience and love for each creature. She realized that his life had been empty not because he lacked love, but because no one had taken the time to see it. They also started sharing stories of their dreams and hopes. He admitted he had always wished for someone to share the mountains with, someone who could see the beauty and the quiet and the care he put into his life. She shared her own dreams of adventure and learning, and they found common ground in their desire to connect and grow. Together one day, while they were walking along a high trail, they came across a beautiful clearing filled with flowers of many colors. The woman gasped at the sight, and he smiled quietly. She reached out to touch the petals, and he gently guided her hand. She realized that he wanted her to experience these moments fully, and that he took joy in sharing the beauty he had known for so long. He watched her with a quiet happiness that warmed his own heart. They began to learn more about each other's personalities. He admired her courage and curiosity, and she admired his patience and understanding. They complemented each other in small ways, making life together easier and more joyful. She helped him see that opening up did not make him weak, and he helped her understand the value of observation and thoughtfulness. They faced challenges together, learning to rely on each other. She showed him how to approach problems from a different perspective, and he guided her through the dangers of the forest and the mountains. She began to feel confident and capable, knowing He trusted her judgment and abilities. He appreciated her insight and began to rely on her more than he realized. Their daily routines became intertwined. She would help prepare food and he would show her new ways to manage the garden or find clean water. He noticed the small changes in her confidence and skill and felt proud of the patience and effort she brought to learning. He also noticed his own heart changing, feeling lighter and more joyful as he shared his life with someone who cared. They also spent time resting together after long days in the mountains, sitting by the stream or near the fireplace. They would simply enjoy the quiet in each other's company. She learned to appreciate the silence that was not lonely but comforting when shared with someone who understood. She could see the gentle heart behind his quiet demeanor, and he could see her warmth and trust shining back at him. He began to teach her skills that were new to her, from starting fires to recognizing edible plants. She made mistakes and sometimes grew frustrated, but he remained calm, patient, and encouraging. She began to see that learning was a journey and that mistakes were part of the process. He admired her persistence and her willingness to keep trying even when things were hard. They shared laughter at small mistakes and successes alike. He found joy in her curiosity and enthusiasm, and she found comfort in his quiet confidence and steady guidance. They discovered that together they could face challenges more easily and enjoy simple pleasures more fully. Their connection grew deeper with each passing day. She began to notice subtle signs of his affection, small gestures that spoke volumes. His careful attention to her comfort, his willingness to put her needs before his own, and the way he would quietly watch over her. She realized that his love had always been there, waiting for someone to recognize it, and she felt grateful to be that person. They also shared moments of reflection and thoughtfulness. Sitting quietly, they would discuss the meaning of their experiences and the lessons they had learned. She learned to see life from his perspective, and he learned to consider hers. They began to understand each other on a level that went beyond words, forming a bond of mutual respect and admiration. The mountain man started to feel a sense of fulfillment. He had not known for years. His days were no longer just a cycle of chores and solitude, but were filled with connection and shared purpose. He enjoyed teaching her and seeing her grow confident and happy in the mountains. She enjoyed his guidance and the way he noticed the beauty in the small details of life. They also found joy in simple shared tasks like collecting firewood together or cleaning the cabin. After a long day of work, they would sit by the fireplace, sharing a quiet meal and talking about the day. She learned to appreciate his thoughtful actions, and he learned to enjoy the warmth her presence brought to his life. Through shared experiences, they discovered the strength of their connection. He realized that letting someone into his life did not diminish his independence, but added richness and meaning. She realized that trust and understanding could grow into a deep and lasting bond. They found comfort and joy in each other, and in the mountains that surrounded them. They began to dream about future adventures together, the places they could explore, and the ways they could continue to learn from each other. They shared hopes and fears, knowing that together they could face difficulties and enjoy successes. She began to see that his life had always been full of love and care, and that she could be a part of that in a meaningful way. Evenings came a time for shared reflection. They would sit by the fire or on the bench outside, looking at the stars, talking about what they had learned and what they hoped for. The mountain man began to feel a sense of peace he had not known in years, knowing that someone truly understood him and valued the life he had built. She felt a sense of belonging and connection she had not expected to find in the mountains. Each day strengthened their bond and brought new moments of joy and understanding. They shared small victories in gardening, cooking, and exploring the forest. They faced challenges together and celebrated the beauty of the mountains and the quiet moments that made life rich. They began to see that connection could bring joy and meaning to even the loneliest of lives. They grew to trust each other deeply, feeling safe in each other's presence. They shared stories, dreams, and fears, forming a bond that went beyond friendship. Their time together revealed the loving heart of the mountain man and allowed the woman to see the beauty of his life in a way no one had before. They both felt a growing sense of hope and belonging in the quiet mountains. One day dark clouds began to gather over the mountains, and the wind picked up quickly. The man noticed the change in weather and felt a sense of urgency. He knew that storms could be dangerous, and that the trails could become slippery and treacherous. He suggested to the woman that they stay close to the cabin and gather supplies. She nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. They quickly collected firewood, water, and extra blankets, and brought them inside. The man checked the roof and walls of the cabin, making sure everything was secure while she organized the supplies and tended to the small garden plants. Inside, where they were safe, they worked together silently but efficiently, each trusting the other to do what was needed. As the storm approached, the wind howled and rain began to pour heavily against the roof. The sound was loud and powerful, but inside the cabin they felt a sense of safety. They prepared a warm meal together and ate slowly, enjoying the comfort of the fire and each other's company. They spoke quietly about past storms and experiences in the mountains, sharing memories and lessons learned. During the night, the storm grew stronger. Thunder rumbled through the mountains and lightning lit up the sky. The woman felt afraid for the first time in a long while and clung to the man for comfort. He held her gently, reassuring her with his presence and calm words. She realized how much she trusted him and how safe she felt despite the fear outside. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the mountains wet and glistening with sunlight reflecting off the leaves and rocks. The man and woman stepped outside carefully, assessing the path and checking for any damage. The forest looked renewed and alive from the rain, but some trails were blocked by fallen branches and small landslides. They moved carefully, helping each other over obstacles and clearing paths as needed. The storm had brought new challenges as well. She had slipped on a wet rock and twisted her ankle slightly, making it difficult to walk. He immediately tended to her injury using a cloth and herbal salve from the garden. He guided her slowly back to the cabin and helped her rest while he cared for her attentively. She felt a deep appreciation for his care and patience and realized the depth of his heart through these small actions. Over the next days, she recovered with his help. He made her comfortable, preparing warm meals and ensuring she had everything she needed. He stayed close, watching over her and making small gestures of kindness. She noticed how naturally he gave love without expecting anything in return, and how much his heart had been waiting for someone to see. If they talked about their feelings during these quiet moments, she admitted her fears of the mountains and how she felt safe with him. He shared his fears of losing someone again and how he had always protected his heart through solitude. They listened to each other with care, understanding, and compassion, growing closer with each shared thought and admission. One afternoon, they decided to take a short walk despite the wet ground. The woman leaned on the man for support, and he guided her carefully over slippery rocks and muddy trails. They reached a high vantage point, where the view stretched across the valleys and mountains, glistening after the rain. She took a deep breath, feeling the beauty around them, and realized how much she had grown to care for him and the mountains he loved. He began to realize that he wanted her to stay, not just for a short visit, but as part of his life. He felt a mixture of fear and hope, acknowledging that opening his heart fully was both risky and rewarding. She noticed the change in him, his actions gentler, his gaze softer, and his words filled with warmth. She felt the connection growing stronger and knew that they had both changed through their shared experiences. They continued to face small challenges together, like fallen trees blocking paths or small animals needing help. He showed her how to be careful and attentive. While she learned to anticipate and respond with kindness and thoughtfulness, she noticed that he began to rely on her presence and insight more than before, and it made her feel important and valued. Evenings were filled with quiet reflection. They would sit by the fire talking about the storm and the lessons it had taught them about resilience and care. He shared stories of past hardships and how he had overcome them alone, but admitted it had been lonely. She shared her own experiences, and they both realized that facing difficulties together made the challenges lighter and the joys greater. The woman began to notice subtle acts of affection he had never shown before, small touches on the shoulder, a helping hand at the right moment, a look of concern when she struggled. He realized that he could care deeply and fully without losing himself, and that the presence of someone he trusted made his life richer and fuller. They started to plan small improvements to the cabin and garden to prepare for future storms. She suggested ways to organize supplies, and he showed her how to reinforce the roof and walls. They worked together eagerly, enjoying the collaboration and the shared purpose. It gave them both a sense of accomplishment and strengthened their bond. One afternoon, they found a small injured bird near the stream, carefully held it, and showed her how to tend to its wound using gentle hands and herbal remedies. She watched with admiration and helped where she could. She noticed how naturally he cared for all living things and how much patience and love he poured into even the smallest acts. She began to understand the depth of his heart in ways words could not express. The storm had tested their resilience and connection, and they emerged stronger and more trusting of each other. They had learned to rely on each other and to share the burden of challenges, which made the companionship even more meaningful. They realized that difficulties could bring them closer and reveal the true strength of their bond. They spent long hours walking together in the forest, learning to anticipate each other's movements and thoughts. She noticed how he always considered her comfort and safety, and he noticed how she contributed in ways that eased his burden. They were learning to move as a team and to trust fully in the other. During quiet nights by the fire, they spoke about the future, acknowledging fears and hopes. They admitted that their time together had awakened feelings long dormant in both of them. She realized the mountains had shaped his life, but her presence was transforming it. He realized that sharing life with someone could bring joy and fulfillment. Beyond what solitude could provide, they began to explore more challenging paths together, learning to communicate silently through gestures and eye contact. She admired his confidence and calmness, and he admired her courage and intuition. They discovered a harmony in working together that made each task easier and each experience richer. The man began to notice that his heart had changed. He felt a sense of anticipation and warmth when she was near, and realized that he had been waiting for someone to awaken the love within him. She noticed that he smiled more easily and laughed softly at small moments, and it filled her with joy to see the depth of his feelings. He felt ready to embrace the connection fully and to let go of the fears that had kept him isolated for so long. They continued to nurture the garden and cabin together, finding joy in routine and shared labor. Each day became an opportunity to learn care and patience. They discovered that even small acts of kindness and attention could deepen their connection and bring happiness to both. Their bond grew stronger with every shared task and every quiet moment. Evenings were often spent in conversation and reflection. They talked about the storm, the challenges they faced, and how they had grown through the experience. She realized that the man she had first met had been hiding a loving heart beneath his solitary exterior, and he realized that her presence had awakened feelings he had long suppressed. They both felt a sense of peace and hope for the future. They began to imagine a life beyond the immediate challenges, a life where they could explore mountains together, face difficulties side by side, and enjoy the quiet joys of companionship. He realized that the mountains had taught him patience and resilience, but she had shown him how to share love and trust. He felt a deep gratitude for her presence in his life, and she felt the same for him. Through shared experiences, they discovered the true value of connection and care. They learned to communicate beyond words, to anticipate needs, and offer support without being asked. Each challenge they faced strengthened the trust and understanding between them, making their bond unbreakable. They began to feel that together they could face anything the mountains and life could bring them. Storm had tested their strength and revealed the depth of their feelings. They had learned to rely on each other to care for one another and to appreciate the love that had been waiting to be shared. They realized that challenges could bring growth and that companionship could transform even the loneliest life. They looked forward to the future with hope and anticipation, ready to embrace whatever came next. Together, after the storm had passed, the mountains seemed brighter and alive. The man and the woman began to settle into a new rhythm together. They worked side by side, tending the garden, collecting water, and preparing meals. The work was lighter and more joyful because they shared it and appreciated each other's efforts. Each small success in the garden or cabin brought laughter and quiet satisfaction, making life feel full and meaningful. The man noticed that his days no longer felt empty. The mornings he spent gathering firewood or walking through the forest were filled with anticipation of sharing the experiences with her. He enjoyed teaching her the ways of the mountains, and seeing her confidence grow, she moved with more ease and knowledge, appreciating the guidance and care he offered With patience and kindness they continued exploring the mountains together, discovering hidden trails. Clear streams and quiet meadows filled with flowers and wildlife she learned to identify. Birds and animals, and he admired her curiosity and keen observation. He showed her how to move quietly and respect the life around them, and she learned too. Appreciate the depth of his knowledge, and the gentleness of his heart. Evenings were filled with conversation and reflection. They shared memories of past experiences, dreams, and hopes for the future. They talked about the lessons the mountains had taught them and the value of connection and trust. Each conversation deepened their understanding of each other and strengthened their bond. They discovered that companionship brought joy and comfort that had been missing from their lives for so long. The man began to take small steps toward opening his heart fully. He noticed that he felt lighter and more content when she was near, and that the empty feeling he had carried for so long was fading. He began to express affection in subtle ways, offering a helping hand, a soft smile, or a gentle word. She noticed these gestures and felt warmth, an appreciation knowing that they came from the depth of his loving heart. They shared simple joys, like cooking meals together, tending the garden, and caring for the animals that visited the cabin. They laughed at mistakes and celebrated successes. Together, learning to appreciate the little moments that made life meaningful. She began to feel a sense of belonging and comfort she had never known before, and he felt fulfillment in sharing his life with someone who truly cared. They also spent time planning for the future, strengthening the cabin and garden, and preparing for the seasons ahead. They worked together to reinforce walls, collect supplies, and organize the home, making it a safe and welcoming place. They enjoyed the collaboration and the shared purpose, finding joy in the act of creating a life together filled with care and attention. The woman noticed how much he had changed since she arrived. He smiled more often, laughed softly at small moments, and showed a depth of feeling that had been hidden for years. She felt honored to witness and be part of this transformation, realizing that her presence had awakened something long dormant in him. They had both grown through their connection and shared experiences. They continued to explore more challenging trails, discovering new views and hidden valleys. Each adventure brought excitement and learning. They navigated obstacles together, trusting in each other's guidance and support. She admired his calmness and confidence, and he admired her courage and thoughtfulness. They discovered a harmony that made their time together joyful and fulfilling. As the seasons changed, the mountains took on new colors and moods. They shared quiet moments, watching sunsets over the peaks, walking through forests filled with autumn leaves, and listening to the wind in the trees. Each day brought new experiences and discoveries. They celebrated the beauty of the world around them and found joy in sharing it with each other. The man began to realize that the loneliness he had carried for years was replaced with warmth and connection. She had brought life and love into his world in ways he had never imagined. He felt a sense of gratitude and peace, knowing that his heart had found a companion who truly understood and cherished him. They also faced small challenges, like repairing tools, preparing for winter, and caring for the animals and garden. The challenges were easier because they faced them together. Each task became an opportunity to learn trust and cooperation. They found satisfaction in working together, and in the quiet moments that followed their shared efforts. Evenings often found them sitting by the fire, reflecting on their days. They spoke softly about hopes, dreams, and the lessons learned from the mountains and each other. They discovered that sharing life and work strengthened their connection and brought meaning to even the simplest moments. They felt a deep sense of gratitude for each other's presence and support. The man began to express his feelings more openly, showing affection and care in small but meaningful ways. She responded with warmth and understanding, appreciating the depth of his heart. They learned that love and connection could grow naturally through shared experiences and trust without needing grand gestures or words. They continued to explore the mountains, discovering new paths, streams, and clearings. She learned to anticipate the challenges of the terrain, and he learned to appreciate her insight and courage. Each experience brought them closer together and strengthened their bond. They discovered the joy of learning from each other and the comfort of knowing someone truly cared. Their days were filled with laughter, work, and quiet reflection. They shared meals prepared together, cared for animals in the garden, and explored the beauty of the mountains they celebrated. Small victories and found meaning in the routines and responsibilities that had once felt lonely, but now brought fulfillment and connection. Woman realized how much she had come to value the man and the life they shared. She admired his patience, kindness, and dedication, and he admired her courage, curiosity, and gentle presence in his life. They both recognized that they had grown and changed through their bond, discovering new depths of feeling, trust, and understanding. They continued to spend evenings by the fire or on the bench outside, looking at the stars. She pointed out constellations, and he told stories he had imagined for each one. They shared dreams, hopes, and reflections, learning to see life through each other's eyes. Their connection deepened with every shared experience and quiet moment. The man felt a sense of completeness he had never known. He realized that life could be full not just of work and survival, but of love, connection, and companionship. He appreciated the warmth and care she brought into his world and felt joy in sharing his life fully with her. She felt the same sense of fulfillment and belonging, recognizing that together they had created something meaningful and lasting. They continued to nurture the cabin and garden, preparing for seasons ahead and caring for the animals that visited. They found joy in the small tasks and in the act of working together each day, strengthened their connection, and made life feel purposeful and fulfilling. They discovered that love and companionship could transform even the simplest routines into moments of joy and contentment through shared experiences, challenges, and quiet reflection. They had built a life together, filled with trust, care, and understanding. The mountains remained a backdrop to their life, a place of beauty, challenge, and learning. They had discovered that connection and love could flourish even in solitude when hearts were open and willing to share. The man often reflected on how much his life had changed since she arrived. He felt gratitude for her presence and the way she had awakened his heart. He noticed the emptiness that had once weighed heavily on him had been replaced with warmth, connection, and purpose. He realized that life was no longer solitary but shared and meaningful. They continued to explore new trails, care for the garden and animals, and enjoy the quiet beauty of the mountains. Together they laughed, learned, and grew, supporting each other through challenges, and celebrating small joys each day, strengthened their bond, and filled their lives with purpose, love, and companionship. Woman and the man knew that their lives had been transformed. They had discovered the power of connection, the importance of trust, and the joy of sharing life with someone who truly understood and cared for them. They looked forward to each new day together, ready to face challenges and enjoy the beauty and peace of the mountains together as they watched the sunrise. From a high clearing, the man felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that the mountains had taught him resilience and patience, but her presence had taught him love, trust, and joy. He looked at her and saw the warmth in her eyes and knew that his life was no longer empty but full of connection and meaning. They embraced the quiet beauty around them, feeling hope, happiness, and the deep satisfaction of hearts finally seen and cherished. The seasons changed again, and the mountains took on a fresh beauty. The man and the woman continued their life together, finding new ways to enjoy the world around them. They woke early each morning to the soft light of dawn and stepped outside to greet the crisp air and the quiet sounds of the forest. Their days began with small tasks that were now shared and full of connection. They tended the garden, planting seeds and watching the plants grow. She learned to anticipate the changing weather and care for the crops with skill and patience. He admired her determination and thoughtfulness as she worked alongside him. They discovered joy in the rhythm of daily work and the sense of accomplishment it brought after morning chores. They would walk through the forest, exploring trails they had never seen before. Each path held a new discovery, a hidden stream, a cluster of wildflowers, or the tracks of animals moving through the woods. She learned to move quietly and observe everything around her, noticing the patterns of nature and the delicate balance of life in the mountains. He enjoyed watching her curiosity and the way she noticed details he had sometimes overlooked. They shared meals together, enjoying fresh vegetables from the garden and fish from the stream. They cooked slowly, savoring each step and each flavor. Each meal became a moment of connection and joy. They spoke about their days, the small discoveries, and the beauty they had witnessed, sharing laughter and quiet. Smiles as they worked side by side, as they walked and worked. Together, they shared stories from their pasts, memories of childhood friends, family, and experiences that had shaped them. They listened carefully, understanding the pain and joy in each story. The man began to reveal more about his life before the mountains, the people he had loved, and the lessons he had learned. She shared her own. Stories of adventure and challenges, learning together how past experiences shaped who they had become. One afternoon, they found a small, injured animal, a rabbit. Caught in a fallen branch, they carefully freed it, tending to its wounds with herbs and gentle hands. She learned from him the importance of patience and care in handling delicate situations. He appreciated her empathy and the care she showed. The act of helping together strengthened their bond and reminded them that life was precious and deserving of attention. Evenings were spent by the fire, sitting close together, sharing reflections on the day and plans for the future. They spoke softly about dreams, hopes, and the beauty of the mountains. They discovered that connection and trust grew stronger through these quiet moments, and that love was expressed not just in words, but in the care and attention they gave each other. The man began to feel more confident in expressing his feelings openly, and she felt the same. They also spent time preparing the cabin for the colder months. Reinforcing walls and collecting firewood, they worked efficiently together, communicating with gestures, and understanding each action showed care for the other and created a sense of safety and stability. They discovered that planning and preparing together brought satisfaction and strengthened their partnership. The woman learned more about the ways of the mountains and how to anticipate changes in weather and animal behavior. She felt proud of her growing skills and enjoyed the guidance he offered without pressure or judgment. He noticed the growth in her confidence and ability and felt proud to share his knowledge with someone who valued and respected it. Each day brought new lessons and deeper understanding. They explored hidden valleys, discovering streams and meadows filled with flowers and wildlife. She learned to recognize signs of animals and plants and to move carefully without disturbing their habitats. He admired her attentiveness and the way she absorbed every detail of the world around them. They shared quiet moments of wonder and appreciation, realizing that life was full of small miracles if observed closely. During rainy days, they stayed inside tending to small projects, preparing tools and cooking meals. They took time to rest and reflect, sharing stories and talking about the lessons learned from the mountains. They discovered that challenges and quiet moments were equally important in strengthening their bond and understanding each other. They grew more attuned to each other's needs and emotions with each passing day. As they walked through the forest, they discovered places that seemed magical, small clearings with sunlight filtering through the trees and the sound of running water nearby. They would pause and sit in silence, feeling the peace and beauty of the moment. She learned to appreciate the stillness, and he learned to enjoy sharing it. She noticed the subtle ways he expressed care through small gestures and attention to detail, and he noticed the joy she found in the smallest discoveries. They began to plan small celebrations for milestones like harvests from the garden or the arrival of certain birds in the forest. They created rituals of appreciation and connection, enjoying the moments of togetherness and the sense of shared accomplishment. Each event strengthened their bond and reminded them that life was richer when shared with someone who cared deeply.